frequently asking, hey, we were joking around in that way. Was that okay with you? And she'll say, yes or no. And so that's cool to do like little self checks. I think that's part of the nonviolent communication process too, is this, let's make sure we're on the same page. Are you hearing the same thing I'm hearing? Are you, kind of checking in with one another? Maybe silly little example, but it's one that has really stuck with me of really real life working at a relationship and connection when there are competing needs and values.
This request to please don't joke with me for the rest of my life, or what did she say? Please don't joke with me
Please don't joke me until I die. Yeah.
Please don't joke me until I die. Brings us to step 4.
Yes,
which is
the request.
Which is request. If we can go this far and identify what our need is, our feelings, and what kind of actions or situation has caused this reaction, hopefully, if we've done work up to this point, it won't be that hard to think of a request. But most of the time, we make demands.
Yes.
When I think back to this time in Bolivia when Asher was struggling with moving to this whole other country and emotions as a 4-year-old that he didn't know how to deal with, my reaction to him was just pure demanding. Mm-hmm. Nope, you just have to do this. You have to do what I say. I'm demanding that you listen to me. I'm demanding that you stay in your room. I'm demanding that you be quiet. I don't know, any number of things. It's a demand when there's no option. There's no mutuality to it. The request, unfortunately, Billy can say to please don't joke me until I die. He could say no.
Right.
I like to joke, and I'm going to keep joking. And that's, I think, what we fear when we make requests of people. If we leave open the option for people to not do what we want, that's scary.
Yeah.
It's the whole idea that other people have their own will and their own choices, and they get to decide what they want to do. No matter how nicely we ask for someone to not do something, they get to decide whether or not they're going to do it. But there's more in the process of nonviolent communication. I think the idea is if we make requests of people, they're a lot more likely to hear the request than if we make a demand.
Right. And especially if you have followed all the steps up to this point. If you've made an observation, you've said how you were feeling, you've clearly stated your need, that's a lot harder that's a lot easier to say yes to the request. When it's clear and you've really increased your connection and, again, that whole shared humanity, a lot of times you get to the request part and it just seems like the natural response is just because you've been seen and you've been heard, and that person, I think, is more likely to, they have an opportunity to help meet your unmet need. And you're kind of, you're building a reciprocity that everyone's needs matter.
I think what is interesting to me, and maybe kind of the genius of this process, is it creates a much easier pathway for empathy. By going through, thinking about how you want to respond to somebody with these steps, you're creating a much more of a possibility for connection, as you said, and for people to identify with how you're feeling because you haven't put them on the defensive, which I think you might agree when we are out in the world talking to people and get into an argument or a conflict with somebody, 9 times out of 10, we are all responding with our defensiveness to what the world is throwing at us from different people. And so this is a way to sort of step back and think about how we respond. One of the things I love about this process is you can use this process anytime, anywhere, even when people don't know what you're doing. They don't.
Yes.
They aren't in touch with their own feelings. They don't know what their own needs are. And it can be very helpful in changing conversations by using this process to try and talk to somebody, even if somebody else is communicating, I guess, very violently.
Yeah, there's something very disarming about it.
We could probably continue talking about this for quite a while, and maybe it would be good to revisit it. I think just to wrap up the 4-part process,
Yeah.
I'll use my smelly feet example.
Oh, good.
Let's see if I can do all 4 steps with smelly feet.
Okay, well, I'll start by telling you that you have smelly feet.
And action.
Action. Lucas, your feet are so smelly.
Kelly, when you say that my feet are really smelly, I feel embarrassed because I don't want my body odors to be called out, and I want to feel like I belong and like you accept me. Would you please not say that about my feet, or maybe say it differently, I guess? Did I do okay?
You hit all the points. I mean, you made an observation. I said that your feet were smelly, and then you said how you felt and what you needed, belonging and acceptance. And then you made a request. And of course, Lucas, I'm sorry I said your feet were smelly. Will you forgive me?
I will forgive you, and I will also wash my feet and see if I need to find an antifungal cream or something to help take care of that. And you can also use this whole process on the flip side.
Yes.
When someone is talking to you. This is important, I think, to say. If somebody's coming at you with a lot of anger or frustration or whatever, you can use the same process to respond to somebody to help them see that you are listening and hearing them. And sometimes that can be harder because we react to people that come at us or that might not be using this process. But you can do the same thing. You can observe. I hear you saying, like you were saying about your children pounding on the table,
right,
their fist on the table. I see that you are very upset about this, and you could ask about a need or a feeling. Are you feeling frustrated because somebody didn't tell you something that you needed to hear or needed to know? Or I don't know. There could be a million different possibilities, sure. But maybe phrasing it as a question about their need, and then maybe saying, would you like to talk more about this? Would you like me to do something different? You could have the request in the reverse. What would they like for you to do? And that's equally disarming, I think, when you're in a situation that's very difficult. Whether it's on Facebook or in real life, you can use these tools to talk to people and deal with difficult conversations.
I will say it's, although it's more awkward, it can feel more awkward until you're a little more practiced at it in person. Facebook is its own whole thing because people feel like the anonymity and not having to not anonymity exactly, but just not having to look the person in the face that they're saying something aggressively to. It gives people more permission to act in a way that they may not actually act in person. But
that's a whole episode I hope to do on.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, but just that disposition of humility and shared humanity, like you said, just whether it's you saying it for yourself or helping someone identify what they may be feeling, or just getting them in a mindset to think about what they might be feeling, can really change the course of a conversation in a good way.
Yeah, well, I think the last thing I have that you mentioned just now is that it takes practice. I do remember after Hope Fellowship, the church that we were part of, did some teaching on using this technique in how we talk to one another. And we were trying to practice it and use it in our meetings and just in our life together. I remember there being pushback from some people who felt like, it feels so weird, or it feels stilted, or it feels not honest or not authentic, or that you're tone policing. That may have been because we were trying to do it as a whole community.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily in just everyday interactions. But I do think that is something that we struggle with when we're trying to practice new things, new tools, new techniques. This hasn't been how we talk to people. I didn't grow up talking to people this way.
Oh, no.
So I have had to work at it. And sometimes I'm really bad and it feels strange. I get mad and frustrated about trying to figure out my feelings or what is my need. But it does become easier and more natural over time. I think once it becomes more practiced, you're able to put it in your own words in ways that doesn't feel like a script.
Right.
I think that's maybe what people had reacted to, is that it felt like a script.
Right.
You had to fill in the blanks, and that sometimes you have to start there.
Right. I think it's good to start with the practice of filling in the blanks, because then, once you don't have to think, okay, what's step one? Okay, now step two. Okay, step three. Once it becomes more natural to you, then it does become your own, like you're saying. I mean, it becomes your own natural conversation. I was speaking with Billy this morning at the breakfast table, and in anticipation of our conversation today. And I was like, can you tell me a time recently where I used the principles of nonviolent communication? And he said, well, yeah, we do it every day. Like, I just feel like that's just how we interact with each other now. He was just pointing out, like, remember when it used to feel really awkward, where we would realize we were really tense with each other and we'd sit down and we'd be like, okay, I am feeling, and now it's just part of our speech and conversation with one another. And then it's just so natural to own what is ours to own, and just how productive that can be in resolving conflict.
Yeah, and that's a great way to wrap up that, as you and I have both learned about this and tried to practice it in our lives and with our families, it really does do what Marshall Rosenberg said at the beginning of the podcast, and it makes life more wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It really does help your communication with your family, with friends, coworkers, strangers that you run into. That's why we want to share it. That's why I want to do this podcast and help people learn how to have better conversations, because it makes life more wonderful for me.
Well, thank you for letting me take part in this, and it's been really fun.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast. I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed it, please help us spread the word by subscribing, sharing it with your friends, rating and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Many thanks to Neil Curran and Infielder for the use of their music. You can find more of their music online at infielder.bandcamp.com. We would love to hear from you and get your feedback on the show or future topic ideas. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at WDTAT Podcast, or email us at WDTATpodcast@gmail.com. A final thought from Brené Brown. The willingness to show up changes us. It makes us a little braver each time. Until next time, keep showing up and keep being brave.
What are you gonna do?